Foundation. And I would like to begin by acknowledging the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on the beautiful Mornington Peninsula, where I am, and pay my respects to elders past and present. So we all know that Indigenous cultures have a very deeply ingrained storytelling tradition, and our webinars are all about storytelling. And this is one of 6 webinars that we are hosting in 2025 with the aim of bringing a Victorian emergency management audience closer to a national and international experts and experience. So we were all shocked very much by the fires that took place in California earlier this year, when a very powerful Santa Ana wind event caused multiple fires. And if you've never been there and don't know what a Santa Ana wind is, think of the most stinking north wind you could possibly get. That was my dear mother's phrase for it, a stinking north wind day. And that caused multiple fires to spread rapidly through the greater Los Angeles area, destroying thousands of structures, burning over 50,000 acres, which I believe is the equivalent of about 78,000 MCGs. So the estimated financial cost of those fires was something like $275 billion. Eye-watering. And the whole event was made up of several fires, but today we're talking specifically about the Eaton fires, where 17 lives were sadly lost, 9,400 structures destroyed, and more than 1,000 damaged. But we're not here to speak about the fires as such. We're here to speak about the cost it had on those who were involved in the response. And thanks to our international network of friends, we were introduced to the people at the LA County Fire Department who are going to share their stories today in a very collaborative way. And as they said to me before we began, we hope that this is something where people can learn from each other. I'm sure that they will learn from us as much as we will learn from them. So let's make this a conversation. So we're absolutely delighted to be joined by Captain Scott Ross. Scott is a retired captain with LA County Fire Department, finishing as a respected peer coordinator. And Nikki Stepanian is a therapist who specialises in trauma and mental health support for first responders, and she works with the LA County Fire Department as in the peer support team. And then we have Dr. Stephen Frulich, who has so much experience it's very hard to summarise. Let's just say that working with Beverly Hills Police, the Fire Union and LA County Fire Department has brought him face to face with many of the disasters that we've hear about on the news. So I'm going to throw over to Steve now to start the conversation and talk to us about how that massive fire event impacted on the people in the fire department and how you've dealt with that since. Over to you, Steve.
I really appreciate that, Susan. And thank you all for inviting us to spend some time with you and to share a little bit of our story or of our experience. You know, it has been just such a wonderful experience for me. I did not set out to work in the fire service. I didn't really know about it. I thought I was going to work with kids, and one thing led to another, and I ended up doing some work with LA County Fire Department and just fell in love with it. Realized that I had not received enough training in the type of stress, the type of critical incidents that firefighters experience. And so I started to take some training. And then one afternoon, Captain Ross and I were dispatched to a fire station after a critical incident in the field. I was really, really lucky that I was attached to the incident with Scott uh, because he took me under his wing at that point. And this was 25 years ago now. Took me under his wing and helped me wrap my head around how do you deliver behavioral health services in a fire service environment, which was completely different from the way that I had been prepared. I thought that I would go in as the professional and sort of take charge of the situation and run this group, kind of like group therapy, you know. Um, and Because Scott has a big heart, when we had a kind of an intermission, he took me to the side and he said something to me like, Dr. Steve, how do you think that went? And I said, oh, it went great. It was good. And he said, and he kind of got that twinkle in his eye, and that I now recognize as, probably didn't go so great. And he went in and he kind of cleaned up, the situation so that the crew was able to talk about the things that they needed to in the way that they're comfortable talking about things. And so I share that story because Scott exemplifies our program, our peer support program, and our behavioral health team, which is peer driven. It is not mental health driven. It is a peer driven program. It doesn't mean that we don't have a significant role. We do as professionals, but we're not firefighters, and there's something in the culture that needs to be respected, and that's what a peer driven program does. So um, I can go on and on about this, but I really wanted to kind of give you that history so that I could turn this over to Scott. Scott, if you'd like to jump in, that'd be great.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Steve. Hello, everyone. Like Dr. Steve said, we're really grateful to be able to spend some time with you. And just something Dr. Steve said and it just kind of stuck with me when he said it. He always thought maybe he'd be working with kids. Well, he actually ended up working with kids. Firefighters are a crazy bunch. And I've had the good fortune to have a really long, very fortunate career. I walked out and retired with, everything pretty much intact. They always talk about physical health, and the one thing that, we didn't really lean into too much until, previous years was that you walk out with your mental health as well, right? So in talking about, and we'll get to these fires because I know we have, a short amount of time and we could spend hours on this incident. I know you guys have had similar situations, but we'll jump right into it. And so thanks, Dr. Steve, with that. And the only thing that I do want to kind of, before we get started too, is that knowing where I am is that, I was a captain with the LA County Fire, 32 years in the fire service. I've been in all kinds of different areas in our department. It's very wide geographically and very different. It's very diverse kind of firefighting culture because we have our wildland division. All of our firefighters, no matter if you're in the urban, inner city, doesn't matter. We all have that training in the wildland because we can all be called at any given time into our wildland division with our brush fire. So, and all that said, I got into the peer support many, many years ago. And the one thing, and just point of reference here is that I'm just a firefighter. I am not a clinician. I train. I'm a master instructor for the International Association of Firefighters in peer support, and I teach peer support training all over the United States. And the one thing that I heavily emphasize is that, and getting back to Dr. Steve's point that he said, is that we're firefighters. we understand that role and we never go to that next level. The collaborative workings of clinicians and peers on a side-by-side nature brings such, I don't even know how I would put this. There's so much value in that one doesn't step in front of the other. But we are the door openers, right? In that fire culture. Could Steve have done a really good job in that? And did he? Yeah, he did. But I have an ability to be that trusted inside fire culture guy to allow that door to open much wider for Dr. Steve and all clinicians to do their work. So we'll get to the Eaton fires and the stuff that we encountered. I know, Susan, you said we were kind of focusing on the Eaton fire, but I will tell you that the Palisades fire, Eaton fire, all, kind of in unison, was all going on at the same time. The winds, I will tell you, I have been in, I can't even tell you how many brush fires I've been responded to over my career. And yet I had retired in November. So I actually wasn't out on the lines, but everything that I was seeing, because I became kind of that sit back and quarterback from afar and watching all the endless hours of coverage was something. And then, of course, talking to folks. I talked to a lot of people that had responded to those fires, and this was next level up. This is not what they would call, we've all heard about a career fire. We've been on those. This is actually at a level where they were talking about a generational type of fire. The winds were in excess of 80, 90 mile an hour. There was no way to get ahead of this. In Malibu, and this has been a constant saying within the fire service in LA County for many, many years, is that, even the worst of fires, we've had this natural fire break. It's called the Pacific Ocean. We know it's not getting past that. So we didn't really worry so much, right? But this was very different. This took out so much destruction in such a short amount of time that the only thing that I could kind of compare it to would be the fires in Hawaii. If anyone has seen any of the documentary stuff that's gone on in Lahaina and what went through that town, this was on a similar level, but more widely spread, because we had two enormous fires in two different locations within LA County. Now, the taxing approach on what it did to our folks, because LA City Fire is another department in the LA County area and very large and almost similar in size with us, not geographically, but in numbers. Were taxed beyond belief. They were heading into something that was, beyond their control and unable to manage, because for one, they had stuff that was going on, and this will lead into my next thing with Nikki we'll cover, is kind of the moral injuries type stuff, but they were against all odds. Water, equipment, staffing, all these things were hindrance. And it also was the same way on the Eaton fire, that this fire grew in such a rapid phase. And I talked to a couple of our folks that were out there in our command division. One of our battalion chiefs, Chief Gonzalez, was there early on the fires, and he even said he's never seen it take off to the level that it did here. So this fire was something way bigger than anything that any of us have ever seen in all of our careers, and the destruction was enormous. And then there was the battle, because the firefighters go to work against all odds, insurmountable, conditions. They're still going to go to work and do.
Agency did not want to come down to LA to fight these fires, because it took them right back to that trauma. So sometimes the effects won't fully come up until the next fire. There was the timing of the fires. This isn't fire season. We're just coming off holidays. This was okay, we're gonna like relax and work some overtime and be with the family and this. So there's that. They're not mentally prepared for fire season. I think and I think this is something that we will be seeing slowly, the effects of it slowly trickling in for a while. I
And
think.
are you planning on doing any sort of studies to track people?
Do you?
Should I jump in on that?
Yeah.
Okay, Susan, it's a good question. We do not have any mental health studies that are going on. We have health studies. We're looking at toxic exposure kind of things. But no, we do not have any kind of a mental health study going on.
Okay. So back to you, Nikki, with what did you do sort of immediately for people? So you recognized, you started to understand that moral injury was an issue. What did you actually do for all these people who never went home for a week, who were there in these incredible conditions? What was your response as clinicians and peers?
So so kind of taking a step back, having a peer response and a clinician on a large incident is a little newer, especially for the duration of the incident. So I have been out to large fires in the past, but it's been 3 to 5 days, kind of get in, get out. This past year, they started realizing we need to have more than just peer response for a couple of days. And so as far as I know, I think Eaton and Palisades were only the second time that they've actually had a peer response team with a clinician attached to the incident. And so what we did, so one, just having us there, I think was very good. I didn't sit in a trailer and wait for people to come to me because I know that they're not going to do that. And so we were out in the field, we that peer response included, outreach to our frontline firefighters, the firefighters backfilling, so we were able to visit all these, our urban search and rescue teams, even our incident management team, because they kind of tend to get forgotten about. And canines, chaplains, all of that. We had a huge response. And so with that, what we were able to do is a lot of informal diffusings, a lot of validating and helping them, like, maybe not, I mean, sometimes I use the word moral injury, but even if I didn't identify it as that, attest to it. Well, it sounds like you're feeling some betrayal, for not, you're feeling unsupported, and letting them know that that was okay. And that's part of a process when you're experiencing something overwhelming and traumatic. And just when you look at like moral resiliency, a big piece of that is being able to talk about it. Right. And then practice, and then recognizing this really does affect me, and then being able to practice some of that self-compassion. But that comes with time. They're action oriented. They're not ready to necessarily practice some of those things, but we would try to just put little seeds there. And then follow-up work where was necessary.
So apart from the necessary follow-up work, I mean, at ESF, our focus is very much on prevention and early intervention. I'm really interested in whether you've come back and you've said, okay, well, you said you expect to see increase in alcohol and substance abuse and perhaps relationship issues. Have you put anything in place to try and circumvent that for people?
Dr. Steve, do you want to talk about your webinars, our preventative side? Oh, you're muted.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Nikki, and thanks for sharing your experience at the on the deployment, and just so everybody knows, and one thing that you didn't mention is that that Nikki and Piers were deployed at the base station, and they were strategically located in a place where when the crews came in at the end of the day, that they had to walk by the peer support trailer, and that trailer had a space within it that was a confidential space, and Nikki was pretty busy with the men and women coming back from their day's work, and unloading, being that supportive listener. We're not going to do intrusive therapy at that point. We're just there to listen and be supportive. And she and the peers did outstanding work. And surprisingly, they were busy. They were being utilized. So that was really that was good to see. As far as what we've been doing post, so the fires were ongoing for about a month. So for the month of January, we were operational. And we kind of stand back. We handle anything that's urgent. There were a couple of urgent requests, one from the Palisades and I think one from Eaton. We were able to provide that support and to help take care of those members who were in crisis.
Was that an accumulation? Was that like this fire was the straw that broke the camel's back for those people?
Yeah, and from my understanding of those two, there was previous mental health conditions that just got exacerbated by what they were experiencing in the fire.
The reason I say that is because I know Shannon, Dr. Shannon Hood, who works with us, at the time of Black Saturday, he was in South Australia, and he was deployed with South Australian fire crews coming over to Victoria in Black Saturday. And he found that when he was actually with them, and he found that what they were dealing with was Ash Wednesday, which was, decades before, that they hadn't processed. And then when they came to Victoria for Black Saturday, that's when it all came back to hit them, of course.
Yeah, and thank you for mentioning that. And by the way, you guys had sent us some of the literature on the Black Saturday, and I was reading through those, the information on those fires. Those were horrible, and they lasted for so long, and relating to things that we've seen. Trauma is it's a unique psychological experience. And, for every person on this webinar who's experienced a trauma, whether it was in your personal life or in your professional life, from your experience that memory is different. It's just different than any other memory that you have. And it can be triggered by any sensory experience, because that's how trauma is imprinted on our brain. It's through our senses. So I hear you when you say that this fire was bringing up, Susan, a previously horrible traumatic fire years ago, and that's going to happen. And those words, normal experience for an abnormal event, that it really means something when you think of it in the context of traumatic experiences. So, yeah, Nikki, go ahead.
So Nikki referred to some webinars that you were doing. Tell us about those.
Oh, yeah. So, and it's so interesting because, Nikki also mentioned that the way that we're anticipating seeing the impacts of the fires is not so much through anything related to the fire per se, or we put together a webinar. We were thinking, let's get ahead of this. and let's get some prevention going. And so we created a webinar on recovery from the wildfires. And we we did, we put a lot of work into that, and that was great. Um, and then we pushed it out in all the normal ways that we push out and advertise stuff. And we did not get one attendee. And I was pulling my hair out. And then Captain Ross, you were involved with a similar project through Dee Dee Hirsch, a suicide prevention center in Los Angeles. And what was your experience?
Well, same. And, this is, Susan, I appreciate where you were going with this as far as preventative stuff, right? What we've learned, what I kind of knew and was hoping it wouldn't be, is exactly what happened to Dr. Steve and Nikki on the webinar for LA County. But like Dr. Steve's talking, I was working with Dee Dee Hirsch, which is mental health services out here in the LA area. They actually run our areas suicide hotlines, but they had gotten some grants to do some preventative work post fires. Let's get ahead of this because we know that there will be impact. And the exact same thing happened. We were focused more with LA City fire and the Palisades. Dr. Steve and Nikki were with the Eaton fire and our folks from LA County. Again, zero.
Yeah, you can't
Yeah.
you can't drag a horse to water. There's some questions coming in here which I think are very interesting. Suzanne, who heads up the wellbeing team at CFA, has asked, how do you look after yourselves and other members of the psych and peer teams given such an overwhelming event? And I guess that's you, Steve, as the lead there. Could you briefly answer that one? What do you do for yourselves? Because we know the vicarious trauma that occurs for people in those roles.
Yeah, thank you, and I love the questions. I'm seeing them on the in the chat. Thank you guys for putting your questions out there. So this self-care piece, and you would think that mental health professionals, like we would be pushing that, right? And we do, but do we do it for ourselves? It's hard for us because we have a tendency to be focused on what other people are needing right now. So yes, we have all the self-care tools in our toolbox. We understand about resiliency. We understand about building resiliency. We understand about taking a mindful moment and taking a breath. In fact, we've got a mindfulness training that's coming up in July, where we're training all of our peers on mindfulness. We're so lucky to have Amishi Jha, who is a neuropsychologist coming in from the University of Miami, and we're going to be part of a research project that she's running. Her background is all with the military, and she's moving into first responders now, which is great. And so I'm looking forward to that. And the end goal of that research, besides learning more about mindfulness and its impact on our community, is we're going to do a train the trainer with the peers that are interested in taking the train the trainer, and then we'll be able to download the tools, the mindful tools, across the entire department, because this is a way for us to be proactive and help our department members build that resiliency within themselves, because we know there's going to be another trauma exposure. Yeah. And so we want to be proactive. It's really hard for us to be proactive, both because fire is a reactive organization. What do? We respond after there's been a situation, we react to it. And so that's where the majority of the attention is going to go. But we're learning about mindfulness, and we're committed to pushing it out throughout our department.
Oh, you might like to have a peruse on our website, because we've got a very big mindfulness section on the ESF website.
I saw it.
Yeah. I'm just very conscious of the time here.
Yeah.
So Beck Smith has asked, during catastrophic fires when it's an all-in response, and you said everybody's needed, everybody was called in, do the peers refrain from that order in so they can remain as a peer, or do they put their peer role to the side and become a firefighter? Maybe you could give a quick response to that, Captain Ross.
Yeah, happy to do so. There's two questions, Susan, that I'll answer. Melissa has one too. It's kind of in there, but so it's an all-in event, but we are very established in our peer support role, and we understand the importance of presence, not even to engage, but just presence. Like Dr. Steve and Nikki were talking about, folks were able to stop into the shop, in our peer support shop in the days. So there are certain people that definitely were assigned as peers, that were firefighters, in their role and stayed in those roles and were assigned as peers to have that presence in and around the fire. And that kind of goes to Melissa's question too, is that, were there, risks, fire safety risks for being, so close to the fire line? Well, our base camps and where our peers were not on the actual fire grounds. We were at a base camp away from the fires, where folks would come in each day to the, to bed down for the evening or chow lines or, regroup. So in our base camps is where we established our peer support teams. Now, were there peers out in the field? Yes, but their role is actually just intel. They actually would be able to send some information into our peer support team members that were in base camp.
So when they were out there, were they firefighters?
Yes.
With a peer hat on?
Yeah.
Well, they were actually firefighters.
Yeah, they're firefighters that are peers that were on the fire lines battling the fires. And we would actually get intel from them, the things that they were seeing or hearing or talking to other firefighters on the fire grounds. But we did not put peers that were assigned as peers to the fire. They were in base camps.
So if they were assigned as peers, they were not firefighters. So that the intel you got was just coincidental, if you like. Exactly. That somebody was okay.
Yeah.
So
all right. So Steve, this question from Tony. Are you getting any sense of the impact of the interventions and offerings that you've had on, that you used during these fires? And is there anything that stands out as a primary enabler or inhibitor in terms of supporting people?
So I'll jump in on this, and Nikki, you may want to add your experience as well. So keep in mind that there were over 40 of our personnel who were also directly impacted by the fires. They lost their houses, or their houses were damaged, so they were evacuated like everybody else, and dealing with all of the same, stresses and anxieties of trying to work within FEMA and relocating their families and getting to different schools, and so those families needed significant attention and support, and so the organization we knew who they were, and so we were able to reach out to them and take care of them. They weren't on their own by any means. On the mental health side, we were able to support them I talked to any number of those folks, and it's hard. It's just really hard going through that process. Um, otherwise, um, I haven't seen the impacts yet. But like
Have you
Nikki
done any
said,
research? Have you done sort of, you know, 4 months after the fires, have you gone back to people and said, what did we do well? What could we do better if this happened again?
yeah, no, we haven't done that yet. Um, I'm still kind of hoping, and maybe this is just my, optimism. I'm hoping that we'll re-offer the webinars on recovery to the wildfires, and maybe we'll get some more attendance, and then we can learn more and get that feedback because those were questions that we wanted to ask during the webinars that we developed. But um, here's our problem. And Scott had mentioned this when he was kind of describing the scope of the fires, but also the size of our department and the call volume. Uh, Over 400,000 calls a year. There's a mentality with that kind of schedule and the issue that we have with having enough firefighters work in any given shift. There's so much pressure on personnel. They're tired, and they don't have time. They don't have time for their families as it is, so we have to be very careful when we ask, to provide, if we're providing training. Are we going to get that eye roll? Oh yeah, here we go again, another training. Um, and the other thing is they've already moved on to the next thing. And so it's difficult to focus on this. So it's
Mm.
challenging. This is very
Okay.
challenging.
Melissa has asked again, she asked Nikki for you to respond from a clinician's perspective about, the way the peers worked and the way you worked in the field, I think is what she's trying to get to.
Yes. So I believe, let's see, you were asking if there's any specific fire training that we undertook.
Yeah, yeah.
So when I talked about going out, where we on the Eaton fire, we did not stay in base camp the whole day. So we did go out, but we didn't go out close to the fire line. So we went to stations that were no longer in danger of fire, and we went to go visit because a lot of the like when they would stage, a lot of them would congregate at these different stations, and then that's where a lot of the donations for food and water and things like that were being dropped off. So we would go there and we would go visit the teams there. Our urban search and rescue team had a staging area that was outside of base camp. We went to go visit them there. So when we were going, we did go out. So we were in the middle of where the fire was, but it was no longer burning where we went.
Okay.
And from a clinician standpoint, you know, it was very overwhelming. I mean, I think just as a human being, right? I saw some of it on TV before I went out there, but to see it in person was extremely overwhelming. And so, but I'm not a firefighter. I'm married to one, but I'm not one. And so I felt like it looked like a war zone for just blocks and blocks and blocks. And it was
So
something.
how have you dealt with that personally?
So yeah, so thank you. So kind of going back to that aspect as well, as far as at least on the fire that I was on, we really bonded as a team. We had a group chat, and even when we all left to go home, we stayed in touch with each other, and we were checking in on each other. I know myself and several of us ended up making appointments with our own personal therapists to just go and decompress, and to just sort out what we saw. I try really, really hard not to just encourage self-care, but actually do it, like practice what I preach. Um, so I think just having that team support though, and just being there for each other, even in the aftermath, we still have the group chat, actually. We're still sharing information with each other.
So important, Nikki.
Yes.
I'm just really conscious of the time. I
Yes.
just saw this question pop up from Chris, which is fascinating for Martine and I, because ESF is just in the later half of the year is doing a study with a group of students about the operational impact of campaign events on families. And so this question is interesting. Are there ways that you engage and support families of first responders, either by helping them support their loved ones or to support them if they're experiencing vicarious trauma? And this is the work that Martine is actually leading for ESF. We've got a huge piece of work in this. So we've got 3 questions to get through in 3 minutes. So if you could answer that one, Nikki.
I can take the family ones, just because in addition to being a clinician, I'm married to a firefighter. My husband was on a team. He's been on many fires, away for 21 plus days, and we raised 2 daughters. So I know what it's like from the family aspect, but then I have also gotten an idea of what it's like to be deployed on an incident and be away from home for 2 weeks, and that transition of coming home. And so one of the things that we're actually preparing to do right now is the proactive webinar in families. How do you raise as healthy as possible? How do you raise a family in a first responder or firefighter culture with all of these challenges that other families don't have? And so myself and another clinician are married to firefighters, and we have children. And so we are using our personal and professional experience and combining them together to talk about what are these challenges, what are some ways that we can support each other, support our kids, how to work, proactive strategies to work through these challenges to minimize that vicarious trauma, because that is a very real impact that we can have as the families.
Oh, well, you might like to collaborate with Martine on some work that she's done and doing, which would be great. I'm just conscious of the time. The question here, maybe Captain Ross, if you could quickly tell us what's the typical pathway from when a peer recognises a firefighter needs more intensive support? How does that work in your organisation?
So yeah, our peers are trained at that level of peer status, right? To recognize, listen, observe, and know when to resource. That comes, just from our engagement out in the field and watching what's going on. And then it's delivering that trust that our firefighters have in us, working alongside them, that we do have clinicians. And it's by word of mouth. That, hey, this is who we work with, this is who we have, and hey, recognizing that you seem to be struggling a little bit, and then kind of bridging that gap, which firefighters are not real good at acknowledging that they need something. But when a fellow firefighter or someone in the first responder world that's gone through the things that they've gone through is acknowledging that to them, it's opened up, many, many doors. So that's our purpose. And we certainly are not dragging them. We kind of talked about, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. We have found that to be very true through those webinars that we started. We know this. I've known this for all the years that I've been doing what I've been doing. Dr. Steve, and Nikki, we can be as proactive as we possibly can, but we know that there's going to be a reaction later.
Yeah, absolutely. Neil, I'm sorry, I'm going to leave your question because I want to maintain the focus on mental health and well-being. And I'm just going to conclude by asking each of you to succinctly tell us, what's the biggest lesson you'd like to share with us about looking after the well-being of people. What have you gained from this huge event that you think is a golden nugget that you would like to share with us to contemplate? Steve, do you want to start?
I'm happy to. I think one of the most important things that we're doing today that we were not doing just a few years ago, and give Scott Ross a great amount of credit for bringing this to us. We bring recruits in before they graduate and become probationary firefighters on a Saturday, and we do a half a day training session with the recruit and with their family members. So sometimes it's a wife or significant other, and sometimes it's their parents, or both. And we have an opportunity before they really start to grind on the job. We have an opportunity to introduce them to the behavioral health team, introduce them to the peer support concept. They meet our chaplain, and we get them for a half a day. And we have a firefighter who has developed alcoholism, kind of share their story of recovery. We have a firefighter and his wife who shares a story of developing PTSD, the impact on the family, and how that family made its way to recovery and healing. And it kind of makes it okay because these are respected members of the department sharing their story. And then Nikki and the rest of the team and myself get to introduce ourselves, so they kind of get some, that's who that is, or that's who that is, and
that's
we
a
have
great
that facial
idea.
recognition. And then we make a number of resources that are available. We make that we bring that to their awareness, and
that's a terrific idea, Steve. I'm just conscious of the time because people are going to other meetings. So just quickly, Nikki, what would be your golden nugget?
I think one of the lessons that really stuck with me is just that the value of presence, of having a presence of peer support and mental health on these incidents. And for us, that's a newer thing, but I think extremely valuable. And I hope that this will be a regular thing on incidents now.
Fabulous. And Scott?
Yep. I would tell you, I think, it's all the work before the big incidents. The presence, like Nikki talks about, the destigmatizing, kind of normalizing what peers do in that gap of referring to resources, and letting our first responders know that this is all much bigger than all of us. And it's okay to not be okay. Once we do that, it's really opened up some doors for the clinicians to do the work that they do.
Fantastic. So look, thank you very much, Steve, Nikki and Scott. It's been terrific. We've had some great questions and people have really enjoyed listening to you, I'm sure. So one benefit of COVID, I suppose, is that we tend to have the mindset that anything is possible. And here we are having a conversation with 3 people from LA today. So I'll just remind people our next webinar is on the 24th of June, where we've got Dr. Nikki Vincent speaking on Stop Fixing Women, Gender Equity in Emergency Services. So that she's absolutely a fantastic speaker. And on the 21st of August, we've got someone from the German Rescue Service joining us. So lots of good things coming up, and of course the Emergency Management Conference in between. So thank you everybody for joining us. Have a good day, and we will put out an e-news tomorrow, and we will share this recording with anyone who wants to listen to it afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.